Today, we're going to talk about something pretty wild. It's the story of the world's oldest active political party, the Democrats, and the incredible, almost unbelievable journey of how it completely flipped its entire philosophy. So, let me just start with a question for you. What if a political party didn't just tweak its platform, but literally inverted its core beliefs over time? It sounds kind of impossible, right? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to solve today. And look at this. This chart lays out the whole paradox right up front. Back in the 1830s, the Democratic Party was all about a minimal, hands-off federal government. Its base, farmers and white working men. And its policy on race, it actively supported slavery. Now, fast forward to today, and it is a complete 180. The party wants an interventionist government, its coalition is built on minorities and city dwellers, and a core mission is pursuing racial equity. So how on earth did that happen? To really understand this massive reversal, we have to go back, way back to the beginning, to the original blueprint from 1828 to 1850. The party was pretty much born from Andrew Jackson's populist movement, and it was all built around this one powerful idea, championing the common man against what they saw as corrupt financial elites. So this meant they wanted a simple, unintrusive government that would stay out of the way, and they hated things like national banks, which they thought only helped the rich get richer. But here's the really crucial part, and it's a huge contradiction. Who exactly was this common man they were championing? Well, for white men, Jacksonian democracy was great. It meant more voting rights, more political power. But for literally everyone else, it meant the active defense of slavery. It meant the forced displacement of Native Americans on the Trail of Tears. The party's populism was explicitly and intentionally built on a foundation of racial exclusion. And that foundation, well, it was destined to crack. That core contradiction would eventually shatter the party, leading to decades of infighting and ideological battles, from the Civil War all the way through the Gilded Age. You know, in the 1840s, the Democrats were a powerful national coalition. They had folks in the North and the South. But by the 1850s, the single issue of expanding slavery into new territories just tore them apart. Southern Democrats wanted it to expand, period. Northern Democrats thought the people living in those territories should decide. The fight got so bitter that by 1860, the party literally split in two and ran two different presidential candidates. Of course, that just handed the election to the new Republican Party and some guy named Abraham Lincoln. So after the Civil War, the question of slavery was settled, but a brand new internal war began. This time, it was all about economics. The party was completely torn. On one side, you had this so-called Bourbon Democrats. They were fiscally conservative, pro-business, and really wanted to hang on to that old hands-off government idea. But on the other side, a powerful new movement of struggling farmers was rising up, and they wanted change. And that movement found its champion, a guy named William Jennings Bryan. His famous 1896 speech just perfectly captured the anger of these farmers against the big banks and the financial establishment. And he did it with this one unforgettable line: "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." So what was this whole cross of gold thing about? Well, it was a fight over money itself. See, at the time, the US dollar was backed only by gold. The populists, like Bryan, wanted to add silver to the mix. They called it free silver. Why? Because it would increase the money supply, which would cause inflation, making it way easier for farmers who were deep in debt to pay off their loans. It was a direct shot at the banks. Now, Bryan ended up losing, but that idea, it definitely didn't die. It would take a full-blown national catastrophe to finally force the party to ditch its founding economic principles. That catastrophe, of course, was the Great Depression, and it led directly to FDR's economic revolution and the birth of what we now call modern liberalism. Just look at this number. In 1933, almost a quarter of the entire country was unemployed. I mean, can you even imagine? The old philosophy of a small, hands-off government was completely and totally discredited. The crisis was so bad that a radical shift wasn't just possible, it was absolutely essential for survival. So Roosevelt's New Deal was basically a three-pronged attack on the crisis. First, immediate relief for people who were suffering. Second, recovery to get the economy back on its feet. And third, and this is the most important one, reform. This reform part was the true philosophical break from the past. It was built on the idea that government must step in to stabilize the economy. This was a complete 180-degree reversal of 100 years of Democratic Party doctrine. And this is where FDR basically redefined the whole concept of rights.
He argued that the government had a duty to guarantee economic rights, like the right to earn a decent living and protection from the fear of getting old or losing your job. This is the exact philosophy that gave us programs like Social Security. But, and this is a big but, there was a catch. To get these radical ideas passed, FDR had to make deals with Southern Democrats, which meant he had to avoid a direct fight on racial discrimination.
Yeah, that compromise on race, it couldn't last forever. The final explosive crises over civil rights would complete the party's transformation and permanently redraw the entire political map of America. To really get what a battle this was, you have to understand what the party's liberal wing in the North was up against. This quote, it's from the 1948 platform of the Dixiecrats. That's the conservative Southern faction that broke away from the party. They stood for, and these are their own words, the segregation of the races and the racial integrity of each race. That was the ideology the party had to defeat from within.
So you have this tension that had been simmering for decades between the party's new belief in an activist government and its old, ugly foundation of racial hierarchy. Well, it was all about to come to a head. This was it, the final ideological showdown.
The break finally came under President Lyndon B. Johnson. With the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, he used the full power of the federal government to enforce non-discrimination and protect the right to vote for minorities. This was the moment. The party had officially picked a side and cemented a brand new identity, one that used federal power as a tool to fight for racial equity. And Johnson knew exactly what this choice was going to cost his party. Right after signing the 1964 Act, he reportedly told an aide, "We have lost the South for a generation." And you know what? He was right. This principled, philosophical stand completely shattered the party's oldest regional base as conservative white Southerners started leaving the party in droves and shifting to the Republicans.
So that brings us to the Democratic Party we know today. Its modern identity is the direct result of this long, complicated history, a story that's really defined by three huge, profound reversals.
Okay, so here's the bottom line. When it came to the role of government, the party went from championing states' rights to believing in a strong central government. On economics, it flipped from a hands-off, laissez-faire approach to active government intervention. And on the social contract, it went from a democracy built on racial exclusion to one that champions universal equity. We're talking a complete transformation on its three founding pillars.
So after all that, you have to ask, is anything the same? Well, remarkably, yes. The one single thread that connects Andrew Jackson all the way to today is that populist appeal, that rhetoric of fighting for the common man against powerful elites. The real key here is that the definition of who that common person is and what they need from their government has completely and utterly changed. If you look at its history, the Democratic Party seems to transform itself in response to massive national crises. And that leads to one final fascinating question for us to think about. What crisis will force the next great reversal?